It's like magic. Good morning. And welcome to First Parish Church of Stowe and Acton, a welcoming and spiritual community. My name is Ruth Ann Murray, and I'm a longtime member. For those visiting FPC for the first time, we welcome you. Please let us know you are here by filling out one of our visitor information cards in the pews and hand it to an usher, drop it in the plate, or hand it to Meg, our welcoming staff member. Yes, question in the back already. Can't hear me? I'm Meg. You're Meg. Oh, thank you. Darn. Please feel free to ask me or any of these people for more information, although I'd stick with Meg. If you would like a large print order of service or hymnal or an assisted listening device, please ask our ushers. Our assisted listening devices are small radios. Anyone is welcome to use one of these to listen to the service from another space in or around the building. After the service, please join us for coffee and conversation in our fellowship hall, which is one level down at the other end of our building, or in a breakout room if you're joining us online. And by the way, there's a wonderful Guatemalan crafts fair going on that's there right now, so don't miss that. I'd like to draw your attention to the announcements in order of service and invite you to check out our webpage for more information. You can also sign up there for our newsletter and email alerts. And now let us come together for a time of community, singing, and worship. And that's my own cue from my own testimonial. When I was asked to speak today, I was flattered until I heard the reason for my selection, and it was something like, you've been hanging around this church for a long time, so it may be interesting, to share what keeps you here. Sharon and I chuckled about that together. But I got a little more serious after that and thought about what this journey with FPC has been like. And although I'm not George Bailey with a ministering angel named Clarence, I started thinking that I've had a pretty wonderful life with this church. I think what first attracted me to the church was music. I came to the fair one Saturday in October about 35 years ago and was drawn to the voices and guitar playing outside the church. One of them belonged to Ralph Galen, the then minister. Later that winter, it was a contra dance with live music as a part of a pledge drive dinner. It was after that I signed the membership book. I was fortunate enough also to have heard Ernest Goldman at the keyboard playing numerous things, including the Goldberg variations, which I later told him I've renamed them the Goldman variations. I also remember former member Chris Delis having a wonderful way with the Chopin nocturnes on the piano. We have always been blessed with wonderful musicians, and from our members right up through our accompanists and music directors. The solstice service last week was another fine example of that. Many of us have found a musical home here. These were much more than siren songs. They led me to a spiritual home to explore my thoughts, my beliefs, to exercise my talents, and to appreciate and learn from those whose talents I did not possess. Ralph led us through spiritual journeys and created some strong bonds that have held through this day. My particular interest and skills tend to be around parties and fun, anything where I can tie a theme to decor, food, drink, and music while raising some much-needed funds. I also loved putting my operational skills to use, finally perfecting the lunch line at the fair so that scores of people could fill their dishes, grab condiments and a drink in the fastest and most efficient way possible. I balked a bit when someone came up with an even better scheme for serving lunch at the fair until I realized how brilliant it was. And then others said, let's segment the fair into different events, helping the church evolve and continue to find new ways to engage the community and support itself. For those of us who do not have children of our own, First Parish has been a place for enjoying the gift of youth and watching some sons and daughters of our fellow parishioners in the mummers play, Morris dances, or just filing through the church on their way to RE classes, or just finding their seats. I took pride many years ago when a little boy who was very fussy about his food loved my ham and Swiss quiche. his parents won in the annual auction. 10 years later, when he became a strapping young teenager, ready to clean out my Acton home, I knew it was the quiche who started him on that journey. And then almost 10 years later, as soon ago as 2 months ago, I was thrilled to see him as a young professional as my physical therapist. I introduced some family members to First Parish Church along the way, starting with my mother. I don't think she quite understood the doctrine of UU, but she got its message. She really enjoyed selling pies, especially when she found another French-speaking member of the church to converse with. My late husband, Al, accompanied me often, although he was brought up in a very different tradition, as his father was an American Baptist minister from Prince Edward Island. My sister Eileen, who frequently helped me to host my church ladies' cocktail parties, made a few visits as well. In their cases, just like my mom's, they didn't quite get the UU thing, and it wasn't always clear that this was unlike what? The churches they grew up with. I discovered that first when Al decided to get up and sing, "Were You There When They Crucified My Lord?" at a spring Vesper service. And my sister Eileen stood up at a Sunday service one morning to express her joy in accepting Christ as her Savior. I must admit to being a little uncomfortable both times, but as I looked around the congregation and the ministers, they seemed to be cool with it, so I could relax and be cool with it too. When I lost all three of them, First Parish was there. Tom had just arrived, and together we planned a beautiful musical service for my mother Lillian. I shared stories about Al's childhood with Cindy, who honored him by asking if she could retell some of those stories in later sermons. That would be the ultimate gift to Al, knowing he would be the center of attention long after he had passed. She also happily joined in singing "Sit Down, You're Rocking the Boat" at his service, where the congregation showed up in numbers to attend and offer their help in many different ways. And when I had to forego the auction to attend my sister's funeral, members stepped in and took up my duties that day. Thanks, Kevin, and thanks, Lee. This has been a home in sickness and in health, and even in the greatest loss of all. Although I spend a good deal of time outside this country, and I'm looking for a second home somewhere in Europe, the bonds to here stretch, but they don't break. I guess because this place is, in many senses, home for me, and that is why when you go there, they have to take you in.
Good morning. Our opening words are from the Reverend Barbara Pescan. For the beauty of the earth, this spinning blue-green ball, yes, Gaia, mother of everything, we walk gently across your back to come together again in this place, to remember how we can live, to remember who we are, to create how we will be. Gaia, our home, the lap in which we live, welcome us. And Chris, would you light our chalice for us this morning? The chalice is a bringing together of two very old religious symbols that go together through different faiths and different times. The cup and the flame. Water, earth of the vessel, flame and air needed to create the flame. It brings together our four elements, and we light our chalice for that this morning. Our opening hymn is number 58, Ring Out Wild Bells. I know it's not a terribly familiar one, but it's kind of a fun one to do at this time of year. Please rise in body or in spirit. Right, no, you stay. You're right. You were right. Please join in our covenant and affirmation. Love is the spirit of this church, and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Be seated. I'm trying to frantically do like little last minute things up here of making sure that the welcome and announcement script is changed to the sabbatical and welcome and announcement script, and put little stars beside the different land acknowledgements that we like the most. And so if you're wondering what Cindy's doing up here, it's like last minute details. We like to begin our services with a land acknowledgement, and we want to acknowledge that we are on the unceded territories of the Massachusetts, Nipmuc, Pawtucket, and Wampanoag peoples, as well as honoring and recognizing the Black and African people whose paid, unpaid, and forced labor built this country and our state. We celebrate and work in solidarity with Black, Indigenous, and people of color organizations, leading our movement for collective liberation in line with our UU values. At this time, I want to invite the kids forward to join me over here for a time for all ages. Rayla, our Director of Religious Education, is taking a well-deserved Sunday off today. So I've got some things to talk to you about. Do you know who I am?
Yes.
Who am I?
Cindy.
Right, I'm Cindy, right. What's my job here? Yeah? To be the minister, that's absolutely right. And what's a minister? That's the hardest question yet. What do you think a minister does? Talks a lot. Yeah. I lead this worship service most weeks, although sometimes we have guests. And we have a sermon that I give where I talk about different subjects. And I also do what we call pastoral care, which is to go and talk to people who are having hard times in their lives and visit people in the hospital and who are sick and stuff. And then also I work with all of our committees and task forces and our leadership to keep this church running and doing all the things it does. And every so many years, the minister gets what we call a sabbatical. Is that a word you've ever heard before? No, I didn't think so. I thought, oh my gosh, I'm about to leave on my sabbatical and nobody has told the kids that I'm going, and then what a sabbatical is. So when you're a minister, and also when you're like a university professor, every few years, in my case, I've been here 6 years, you get to take a little break for a while. And for me, that's going to be 4 months. So that means I'm leaving at the end of Christmas, basically, and I'm going to be away for 4 months, which is January, February, March, April. And I'll come back in May, just in time for our end of the year stuff. And that means I won't be here for Easter to watch you do the egg hunt. And so ministers get this kind of a break, and it's kind of like a vacation, but it's kind of a working vacation where we study things and we do some reading. I'm going to be doing some art, and that's why I'm not going to see you for a few months. So I wanted to come here and say goodbye to you today. Although some of you I'm going to see in 2 days for Christmas Eve. How many people are going to sing in our Christmas Eve service, do you think? Some of you? I hope all of you. You just don't know yet. Yeah, we're going to sing. What are we singing, Chris?
Go Tell It on the Mountain.
Go Tell It on the Mountain. And he's going to work with you after religious education class today to learn that song. So to say goodbye, I brought you a little early goodbye present. And because I said, what did I say I'm going to be doing on this time? Studying. Yeah. And doing art. So, and doing some reading and doing some art. So I brought you artistic bookmarks. to remember me by. Have you done those kind of black scratch off and it shows colors when you scratch it off underneath? That's what those are, and there's 2 of them in each bag. I'm going to let you each take one. And that's so while I'm doing studying in art, you can do studying and art. You can do reading and art. Did you all get the colors you want? You want to trade? You're welcome. Okay, I have a problem here. It looks like I got too many. So can everybody take a second one? Yeah. Yeah, there we go. And we remember to be careful with those sticks because they're kind of pokey, but you need them in order to scratch off the ink things. So, but be careful with them, okay? Oh, I still have too many. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. See, if I don't give these all away, the adults are going to fight over them. Like, take one more. They're already asking me, can I have one? Can I have one? I don't have enough for all the adults. Like, look, they're raising their hands. Okay. I have just enough left for Katie and Jonah, our young adults who are working the tech over here. So, all right, those 4 are for you. All right, well, thank you for joining me, and I'm going to miss you so much, but I'll see you before long, okay? Have happy holidays while I'm gone. And at this point, we're going to light our lantern and go to, all right, we got 2 volunteers. Oh, 3 volunteers, yeah. Oh, 4 volunteers. I didn't see you, I'm sorry. Yeah, go on up and help. Well, if they don't have enough sticks, that's okay, because the stick can work for more than one. You get a splinter? This is the time in our worship service when we want to have a moment to let each other know what's happening in our lives, to share the joys and sorrows that are on our hearts and in our minds. And so if you have a joy or sorrow, we're going to ask first that our lay minister Ingrid here shares those that we've received online, and then we'll bring the microphone around to those here in the room, and then let the folks who are off-site unmute. So Ingrid. Thank you. Still in our hearts and minds, we light one last candle that they too are lifted up in beloved community. And then we light one final candle for the cost of war that is always on our hearts. I hate those clicky things. I can't use them either, so... We'll get that last candle lit. Meanwhile, let's have a moment of silent prayer or meditation, reflection with these words by Starhawk. Earth Mother, Star Mother, you who are called by 1,000 names, may all remember we are cells in your body and dance together. You are the grain and the loaf that sustains us each day. And as you are patient with our struggles to learn, so shall we be patient with ourselves and each other. We are radiant light and sacred dark, the balance. You are the embrace that heartens and the freedom beyond fear. Within you, we are born. We grow, live, and die. You bring us around to the circle of rebirth. Within us, you dance forever. Blessed be. Our next hymn is number 1063, the Winter Solstice Chant. It's in your teal hymnals. Please rise in body and spirit. Please be seated and grab your other hymnals, the gray ones, and turn to number 517. I'm doing something that I don't do very often, which is use a responsive reading. Some UUs get really touchy about responsive reading, like, what, you're putting words in my mouth and making me say them, but without music? And there's always this, like, I'm putting down one hymnal, grabbing another one, flipping. I'm chattering while I wait for you to flip. I'll read the regular text and you read the italics, please. These are words again by Starhawk. I, who am the beauty of the green earth and the white moon among the stars and the mysteries of the waters.
I call upon your soul to arise and come unto me.
For I am the soul of nature that gives life to the universe.
For me all things proceed, and unto me they must return.
Let my worship be in the heart that rejoices, for behold, all acts of love and pleasure are my rituals.
Let there be beauty and strength, power and compassion, honor and humility, mirth and reverence within you.
And you who seek to know me, know that your seeking and yearning will avail you not unless you know the mystery.
For if that which you seek, you find not within yourself, you will never find it without.
For behold, I have been with you from the beginning.
And I am that which is attained at the end of the desire.
In our sermon today, I'm going to be talking about paganism and Wicca and how they came into Unitarian Universalism. And so I did something today that I don't usually do, which is to use a lot of readings from the hymnal. Our opening words, our meditation words, and our reading here have all come from our hymnal in order to kind of illustrate how paganism has been with us for a long time in this faith, and at least since the creating of this hymnal, which happened when I was in high school, like 1986, I think the hymnal came out, or thereabouts. Our plate is shared here at FPC with different agencies that we have voted as a community to support. And this month, it is our very own guest table, which provides free community dinners to the larger community for which all are welcome monthly here at FPC on a Friday. If you haven't been to one, I encourage you to come to one of our guest table dinners. When we say they're open to everyone, that means you too, so come and join us. And we're always looking for more volunteers for them, but we're grateful for the funds that support them and support this church in the good work that we do. So thank you. This year, we're doing a world religions series throughout the year. We had early in the fall a guest speaker from the Jewish tradition who came and shared her story and her music with us. Then we had one of our own members, Neil, talk about his roots of Quakerism, or the Society of Friends. And then in the new year, you're going to hear from guest speakers from the Buddhist and Hindu and Muslim and Baha'i and Native American traditions. But, Unitarian Universalism is a unique faith in that we represent a lot of different faiths within our own circle. Those who came to our solstice service on last Sunday, and if you didn't, it's available on YouTube. If you came to that, you saw that we have a lot of different faiths represented within our own faith. One of those that has been in a really important tradition to me that I want to make sure we didn't forget to cover is paganism and Wicca. And those are something that are sometimes really misunderstood because the word paganism is used kind of as an epithet sometimes from the Christian tradition, that pagan is everybody, and pagan for them sometimes means everybody who doesn't believe what we believe. Everybody who's not Christian is pagan in that context. When we say paganism in Unitarian Universalism, we mean very specifically earth-based traditions, those that are older and the roots in the various parts of the world that usually we mean specifically the parts of the world where Christianity became dominant and sort of drove out these older indigenous faiths. So a lot of times that's like Celtic and Nordic spiritualities, but also it can mean African and South American and other traditions of the world that were there before Christianity came in. Wicca is another word for witchcraft. And a lot of times people wonder, why do people use the word witchcraft? Because it's such a negative word in our society. But again, it's something that is older than the roots of Christianity and that we're reclaiming. And sometimes that reclaiming is creating new traditions in those names, but sometimes it's reaching back in and trying to pull out the older traditions and celebrate them once again. So Wiccans generally believe in either a goddess or a god and goddess in combination and worship that and follow practices that are very earth-based. They have 4 cycles of the year that follow the seasons, and so the 4 major Sabbats and the 4 cross-quarter days. So that means they celebrate the equinoxes and the solstices, and then the high holy days of Halloween or Samhain, Imbolc, which is St. Bridget's Day or Groundhog's Day, as we celebrate it in modern American culture. And then there's May Day or Beltane. And then the one that we don't really have as much recognition of in modern American culture, which is Lughnasadh or Lammas, which is it happens in the summer. So I keep looking over at my husband to make sure that I'm right, because Peter was a Wiccan for many years before he and I then met in the UU church in the 1990s, and so he'll correct me if I get anything wrong. Paganism came into the Unitarian Universalist faith as we opened our doors wider and wider. When I tell UU history to our newcomers in our FPC journey class, I talk about it as a series of facing a controversy and opening our doors wider. Originally, we were Christian faith, and we had 2 heresies, 2 different denominations of Unitarianism and Universalism that were about embracing heresy. And then controversies arose where we said, can you be a theist, but not specifically a Christian, and be a you or UU, and we opened our doors wider and said yes. Then the humanist controversy in the 1930s came into Unitarianism, and we said, can you be a humanist, an atheist, or an agnostic, and be a Unitarian and a Universalist? And the answer, again, was yes, and we opened our doors wider. It was the 1970s and 80s, really the 1980s, when paganism started really emerging in Unitarian Universalism. And once again, we said, can you be a pagan? I mean, pagans, don't they worship lots of gods? But we're Unitarian, that means one God, right? Can you do this in the UU church? And again, we said yes, and opened our doors wider. Unitarian Universalism really started encountering paganism and Wicca, specifically in our movement, because they came in with feminism. So I wrote down a few little dates here to remind myself. In 1979, I think, or 1977, one or the others, I might have that date wrong, but in the late 1970s, we as an association started having more women enter the ministry. In 1974, we founded an organization called Ms. UU, the Ministerial Sisterhood Unitarian Universalist, because there were so few women in the ministry at that point that they really needed that solidarity of an organization to come together and talk about their experiences. By 1977, there were only 5% of women in the ministry in Unitarian Universalism. By the time I got to seminary, we were nearing that 50% threshold, and we passed it, I think, the year after I graduated. We hit 50% women ministers in Unitarian Universalism, first denomination to do that. So as women are coming into the ministry, at the same time, paganism and feminism is coming into our movement. At the same time, paganism is coming into our movement. So in late 1970s, we passed the Women and Religion Resolution as a denomination that basically says we're going to look at sexism in Unitarian Universalism. We created a curriculum called Cleansing Our Temple that had congregations do like a sexism audit on a congregation by congregation basis if they chose to. We are a free church tradition. Not every church did this. But denominationally, in every district, women in religion committees were basically created, and they started holding conferences. And those conferences were amazing. I'm wearing this stool here today, this sparkly, shiny stool, because those conferences were still happening when I got into seminary. In my internship congregation in Milwaukee in 1999 to 2000, I think was my internship year, they had one of the last women in religion conferences, and they took over the church, and they draped the sanctuary in this fabric of starry, spangly fabric draped all over the sanctuary for this event. And afterwards, the women of that congregation made me this stole and gave it to me as an affirmation of my ministry as a woman. And when I got here, one of our members put a band on the back of the neck because this thing is super itchy. And I wore it once or twice a year for 20 years with it, or like 18 years with it itching the back of my neck until I got here, and that got fixed by the women of this church, so thank you. 1980, I'm turned 10 at this point. 1980, they have a Women in Religion convocation held in East Lansing, National Conference of Women coming together in East Lansing, and two things happen at that conference. One, it's the first time we know of that a UU pagan service was held, period. 1980 in East Lansing, Michigan, at that Women in Religion convocation. Secondly, a controversy breaks out about a woman breastfeeding. I think somebody made a negative comment to her about breastfeeding in the service or in a meeting, and controversy breaks out, and the women demand that they're going to affirm that you can breastfeed in church. Now this is like when my mom was, my little sister Carrie was born in 1977, my mom was criticized for breastfeeding in a UU church in 1977, so this was common. And one of the things I've done as a minister is say that like our churches affirm the right to breastfeed, but that's not something that every church does, and we certainly weren't there yet in the late 1970s, 1980s. So when that controversy breaks out at this Women in Religion conference, the women come together and they affirm the breastfeeding and they create a ritual. And that ritual is the water communion, where every woman brings water and pours it into a common bowl and talks about how all the waters of the world are one. And that ritual is celebrated by many Unitarian Universalist churches at the beginning of their year, every year across the country ever since. And it started out of the mother's milk, which I just always think is a beautiful story. So in the 1980s, after that convocation, we're affirming feminism more and more in our movement. We are, at that point, rewriting the Unitarian Universalist principles, which takes a 2-year vote in 1985 and 1986. And one of the reasons we're doing that is because the old hymnal, and we're writing this new hymnal, too, to bring in specifically women-centered imagery. So some of the hymns we've used today and things like Lady of the Season's Laughter and other hymns, We Are Dancing Sarah's Circle, Not Just Climbing Jacob's Ladder, are in here to bring in a women and men-based equality. Now, we can talk about how the gender binary is now throughout all this hymnal, and we saw that in our hymns today, and now we want to break down that gender binary. But it was a radical thing we were doing at the time. We're bringing together women's imagery, pagan imagery enters this hymnal too for the first time. And so we have a couple pagan type hymns in here. And we change our principles from the 1961 principles we created at Merger to create principles that have both earth-centered imagery and women and men both in the language. Instead of saying we are the brotherhood of man as an association, we now say we affirm and respect the inherent worth and dignity of all people. So 1985, a group forms called CUPS, which is the Covenant of Unitarian Universalist Pagans, and it's a group that opens up chapters at different churches across the association. There's 110 chapters today of CUPS, the Covenant of UU Pagans, across different congregations across our denomination. And then in the 1990s, they changed not just the principles, but then they changed the sources that follows the principles in the bylaws. Now, we just changed these both, so they're no longer in our bylaws last year. We've moved on from that. But at that time, we had a statement in our sources, we called it, that said, we as a living tradition draw from many things. We draw from Jewish and Christian traditions. We draw from world religions. We draw from humanist teachings of justice-seeking people. We draw from science and that teaches us and humanist teachings which teach us about the world. And then we added to all of that the sixth source of that we draw from earth-based spiritualities. And that was a radical moment in our faith that we said, we're voting this in now, that our doors are open wider in the 1990s. I came into this faith as a young person in the 1970s and sort of grew up amidst this movement. And it was while this was happening in the late 1980s and early 1990s that I sort of stepped away from Unitarian Universalism because I was in college. But ironically, I was doing what our faith was doing, because a lot of people found paganism, like I said, through feminism and through science fiction and fantasy and works like The Myths of Avalon. Anyone ever read The Myths of Avalon back then? A few women's hands going up. Myths of Avalon took the Arthurian myths and rewrote them to be women-centered and tell the story of the women in the Arthurian myths, and brought in a pagan point of view. And it made it that the Arthurian myths was a clash between paganism and Christianity as the world was changing in that era. So Margot Adler, around this time, writes her groundbreaking book, Drawing Down the Moon. Margot Adler was a Unitarian Universalist. She was an NPR correspondent. She was the author of this groundbreaking book on neo-paganism and Wicca, Drawing Down the Moon, which put in it a survey of how did people find the pagan faith. And it talks a little bit about Unitarian Universalism in this book, briefly, but it talks about how women and men find the pagan faith through feminism, through literature, through music, and that's the entryway in. And so it was with our faith as well. So I was reading those books and I was exploring pagan ritual in college, as one does. Yeah, right? Some of us explored a little pagan ritual in college. And then I went from there off to graduate school at the University of Georgia, where Peter and I met. And then from there into seminary, where I went to my first real pagan ritual during seminary. And that was held at the Beverly Unitarian Church in Chicagoland. If you've never been to the Beverly UU Church, it was built like a castle. It's the Castle Church. And we went there for an Imbolc ritual, and we worshipped the goddess Inanna and her descent into the underworld and her rise back up. So this was formative for me in my early years of ministry, I was exploring feminism. I did my doctoral dissertation on feminism and Unitarian Universalism and how it was changing with the generations. And the paganism of that movement was deeply influential to me. So what we're going to find in our World Religion series is that you're going to hear not every time a 101 class of like, this is what the religion is, but you're going to hear people's personal stories about what that religion has meant to them and how they've lived with it, or you're going to hear them talking about issues within that religion and how they want to bring those issues to the fore with you, and it's going to be all over the place, but not always a one-on-one. So what I wanted to do today was talk about the ways paganism and Wicca in our faith have meant to me, from the fact that this first stole I was given comes out of that tradition, to a story I have of when I was minister over in Gardner, Mass. And this was the winter, fall/early winter of 2003. And I went out to row camp for a minister's retreat. Do you know row camp? Row camp is a UU church out in the Berkshires. And so the ministers often had retreats there. And so we went out to row camp, and I'm walking the paths out there under the sky and in the trees. And I stopped, and I put my hand against a tree, and I said a prayer. And I prayed, God, I want to have a child. And I put my hand down and, concluded my prayer. And I walked like 2 steps, and I felt a push against my back that slammed me down to the earth. And at the time, I didn't know what was God's answer to my having a child. Although I got pregnant about 3 months later, and Katie was born 9 months after that. But I realized later that was the goddess. Now, I'm an agnostic, humanist person. I don't know that I believe in the goddess, but I believe if that was a spiritual force, that was the goddess saying to me, you are praying the wrong way, sister, when you're praying for motherhood. Listen, I am here with you. I walk this path with you. It will be as it will be. And I just knew that was the message. Like, I don't know that I believe, but I know that something was with me there on the path that day. And that's the only answer I have. So I wanted just to share that with you, that we come from many faiths in this church, and we have many influences of the divine, many different experiences or lack of experience. Some of us have said God or the goddess or anything that's out there. If it's there, it has never spoken to me. And I say that sometimes too, that I don't have an answer. Like, nobody's ever made it 100% clear to me that they are the divine power. But we come from all these different traditions, and we can hold the diversity in this space. We can hold the diversity within our own souls, that you can be at one moment a worshiper, and in another moment a skeptic, and in another moment an explorer. And all of those can reside in the same soul here in this faith. And that's one of the beauties that is Unitarian Universalism. Thank you for walking this path with me. Our closing hymn is the one thing that's listed under Christmas carols, but is actually a solstice carol, because it talks about Yule, not about Christmas, and it's Deck the Hall. Now, Chris and I will point out that the words are actually hall singular. Deck the hall with boughs of holly. Please rise in body and spirit and join in singing. So you see how the old traditions, they slip into Christmas. Thank you for being here with me on the solstice day. I conclude with the words we conclude with many pagan rituals: merry meet, merry part, and merry meet again. Merry solstice, happy Yule. Go in peace.